Is an iPad a good option for digital art? Can you actually turn it into a professional device, or should it just be for doodles and small things? Hopefully, we are going to cover all these questions and more in today's video. Hi everyone, how are you doing? I'm Rina, a digital illustrator. A year ago, I got an iPad with my wife, and I promised I would make a review in the future from the perspective of someone who already uses a pen display for professional work. I wanted to put this out sooner, but you know, review videos take a lot of time, especially for me, as I try to make them as detailed and objective as possible. The good side of this delay is that I've had enough time to test the iPad and get a very good idea if such an expensive device is worth the investment or not. This video isn't sponsored by Apple, by the way. We actually bought this device with our savings. So my opinions will, as usual, be 100% honest. Before we get to the main point, please check out my Patreon. You would help me so much if you joined my campaign, and you'll get lots of rewards every month, like sketches of my art that I don't share anywhere else, high-resolution versions of my illustrations, layered files, and more cool stuff. And now, without further ado, let's start the review. Hey, that rhymed! So the model we got was the iPad Pro 2020. I believe that's the second generation of iPad Pros, I'm not sure. In the 11.6 inches version. And these are some of the accessories we got for it as well. I'll go into more detail about them as we move forward with the review. I won't talk a lot about the boring specifications you can find on any website, such as the quality of the screen, the cameras, refresh rates, and all that complex stuff. I'm here for the empirical knowledge, to put it somehow. The iPad is a tablet with its own operating system. You don't need to connect it to a computer to be able to draw, like it happens with pen displays like the Cintiq I use for my daily work. On the other side, it also means that the available apps to draw are restricted to that system. So if, for example, you're a SAI user, like I was before, you won't be able to use that program to draw on your iPad. Instead, you'll have to switch to another alternative. The good thing is there are a lot of good options when it comes to digital art apps on iPads. Some of them are free, like Ibis Paint and Medibang, and others require a payment, like Procreate, or a monthly subscription, like Clip Studio Paint. So the first thing you should consider before buying an iPad is if you'll be able to use the program you're comfortable with, or if you're willing to put some extra effort and get used to a different one. If you've never done digital art before though, that won't be an issue since you already have to learn everything from scratch. My wife and I decided to go for Clip Studio Paint since we had already worked with that program on our computers. And while it's a monthly subscription instead of a one-time payment, which kinda sucks, it's still worth the money in our opinion. While I talk more about this cool device, I'll be drawing something to make the review a bit more entertaining. How about that Cinnamiku that's been trending lately? I love that cute hairstyle. Okay, so let's talk about the performance of the pen, as that should be one of the key aspects for every artist. Up to the day I'm making this video, Apple offers two types of pencils for the iPad. The first generation and the second generation. Not very creative titles, but hey, the simpler the better. Apple Pencils are not included when you purchase an iPad. You have to get them separately at an extra charge. And they're not cheap, sadly. We got the second generation pen as we felt it was the most appropriate for our case. Make sure to carefully check which version is compatible with the iPad you'd like to get, by the way. The initial activation force feels great. You guys know I'm a freak about this little detail, but really I'm very satisfied with it. You can start the line with little to no pressure. From what I've read online, Apple has never stated how many levels of pressure their pencils have, so I cannot give you a number, but the range is pretty good. I'd say it's similar to Wacom's quality. It feels different somehow, but it's not bad, just different from what I'm used to. There's no noticeable parallax between the tip of the pencil and the screen. The lines are drawn exactly where you point your pencil at, making it super easy to draw. Something I dislike about it though is that the Apple Pencil is too thin for my taste. That's why I use it with this rubber grip thingy, and I would totally recommend getting something like this, especially if you've suffered injuries in your hand or fingers or arm from drawing. The thinner a pencil is, the more strain it puts on your muscles, so I personally wouldn't risk it. It says that the pencil has palm rejection, which means that while you're using it, the iPad won't detect any other touch of your hand, but I don't know, I guess my hand is too big or something, because I sometimes move the canvas accidentally or change the settings when the side of my hand touches certain parts of the screen. It's not a big deal, honestly, and after a while you learn how to place your hand to avoid this as much as possible. But I thought it was worth mentioning. I noticed that if I wear a drawing glove, this happens very rarely, by the way. So there you have another possible solution to the issue. I just can't work without a drawing glove. I don't like the texture of a screen against my skin. The Apple Pencil is rechargeable. For this specific model, you do that by placing the flat part of the pencil on the magnetic side of the iPad. I've never been a fan of rechargeable pens, but I don't find it annoying in this case at all. The battery of the second generation Apple Pencil holds for several hours, definitely enough to last you a long drawing session. And the best thing about it is that the recharging process is super fast. 5 minutes give you about 40% of the charge, and 10 minutes give you about 70%. So, for example, let's say you draw for a couple hours, then you can snap the pencil to the side for 10 minutes while you take a small break, and then come back and keep drawing with a full battery. Another interesting feature of the second generation Apple Pencil is that if you double tap on it, it turns into an eraser. Double tap again, and it goes back to the brush you were using. It is pretty handy, especially I think for taking notes, but I wouldn't rely too much on it for drawing. I feel like repeating this tiny movement with your finger over and over could potentially damage your hands and arm muscles. Of course, if you use a thick rubber grip like I've mentioned earlier, you can't really use that function. You could try using a pencil case instead, if you really need that feature but still want to add a more comfortable grip. After a year of pretty much daily use, the tip of the pencil still seems to be in perfect condition. I've seen some people complain that their tips wear off super fast, but for us it's still holding up very well. Maybe it depends on the amount of pressure you put on it while drawing, I'm not sure. Replacement nibs can be bought on Apple's website, Amazon, and the like. But we have recently discovered that cheaper alternatives from AliExpress, for example, can work just as fine. You can even find them in different hardness, like real pencils. Personally, I didn't like the 2B ones. Their softer finish takes away the texture from the screen protector we use. I'll get to that later, don't worry. We do have a small problem with the pencil though. For some reason, every stroke we make on Clip Studio Paint comes out with a tiny round spot on the start of the line. It's not a big deal because we can customize the brushes to minimize that effect. But the funny thing is, this doesn't happen at all when we use Procreate, for example. This doesn't seem to happen to every iPad user, and I believe it might be more of a bug within the app you use. But I still wanted to point it out just in case you'd like to do some research on the matter before purchasing anything. Recently too, our pencil has been glitching or something, and sometimes it will draw an unwanted straight line out of the blue. Again, I'm guessing this is probably a bug from Clip Studio Paint. It's a bit annoying, I won't lie, but it doesn't stop you from drawing comfortably, since it only happens sometimes. I think that would be it for the pencil, so let's move on to the next subject. The screen, for example. Its colors look great, as they should with an Apple device. Brightness is perfect too, and very easy to adjust with the Q menu at the top right. And it even has a warm light option to lessen eye strain, which again is super easy to turn on and off. I personally keep it on while I'm just doing line work or doodling at night. Something I didn't like one bit from the beginning was the texture of the screen, or rather the lack of texture. It was super shiny and completely glass-like. The pen would slide way too easily on the surface, making it hard to control my lines, and it got fingertips in dirt like crazy. We were constantly cleaning the surface during the first days. If glossy screens aren't your thing either, I recommend one of the following solutions. Either get a screen protector, matte and with texture. We use the Paperlike one. It's pricey, but I'm super happy with it. And after over 1 year of use, it still holds very well. Plus, this serves as extra protection against scratches, fingertips and dust. Or, if you already like the super ultra shiny look of the screen, I won't judge you, to each their own. You can get a cover for the pen tip. The rubber coat adds a bit more resistance to the tip, giving you more control over your lines. I prefer the screen protector. When I first tried the nib cover, I didn't feel like it did much for me, and the glossy screen and lack of texture still bothered me anyway, so... iPads have no row of buttons to set as shortcuts you can use while drawing. This way, they can stay a rather small size and become a very portable device. Although, I have a little trick to make up for this. It's this little gaming pad called 8BitDo. You can basically customize the buttons of this thing to react to shortcuts like Ctrl-Z, changing the brush size, color pick, etc. I bet you can pretty much use any type of Bluetooth controller for this type of thing. The 8BitDo one is just super comfortable since it can fit on your palm and has quite a few buttons. Furthermore, if you use Clip Studio Paint, you can drag the side of the screen to get a few more on-screen shortcuts like Control, Shift and the like. I don't know if other programs have a similar thing though. The 8BitDo controller, by the way, doesn't work on Procreate, and I'd say any sort of controller does not work with that app because it's just set up differently. But you can try making some research. Just be very careful, because there have been several scams where people were selling specific controllers for Procreate shortcuts, but they never worked in the end. And now that we are talking about Procreate, you should also know this. Depending on the capacity of the RAM, Procreate will limit the amount of layers you can have on a drawing. For example, if I make a DIN A4 file at 300 dots per inch, I can only have 75 layers at the same time. If I make the file smaller, an A5 for example, the amount increases to 148. And if I choose a bigger size, like an A3, it decreases to 35. For reference, our iPad has 6 GB of RAM. So if you get something with less capacity, the limit of layers will be even smaller than this. Clip Studio Paint, though, doesn't seem to have any layer limit based on the device's memory. So it's not really an issue for us. I don't know if other apps also have layer limits based on the RAM, but if you're planning on using Procreate, for example, you should know these and choose a device with enough capacity for what your artwork will require. Like I said at the beginning, our iPad is the 11 inches version. It might seem small at first, but I think it's enough to draw comfortably on it. I'm used to my 13 inches Cintiq and I don't find the difference too problematic, especially if you find a good weight to arrange your tools and working space. So if you're unsure whether to get the 11 or the 12 inches version, our personal recommendation would be to go for the smallest one and save a few bucks. You can use them for the pencil. The iPad gets a little hot when you draw on it for a while, but it's not too uncomfortable, especially if you get an iPad case, which you totally should because they're not that expensive and they'll protect your little friend from scratches and bumps. Finally, let's talk about the price. iPads are very expensive. We all know that, especially the Pro models that can easily go up to at least 800 euros. And that's without the pencil, which is roughly another 100 euros depending on the version you get. They're a big investment for sure, but considering that Wacom's only portable options, the Wacom Mobile Studio, are like twice or thrice the price, I don't think 800 euros is that terrible in that sense. Keep in mind that the iPad is a device with its own operating system. You don't need anything else to draw on it. No computer, no extra screens, no adapters, just the iPad and the pencil and you're good to go. You can take it with you and draw on the go while having a coffee or even while you're on the bus. And of course, you can use it like a regular tablet or smartphone and watch movies in it, check social media, and all that stuff you modern people do nowadays. It's a very complete device. You can always try to find deals on second-hand markets, older versions, or the iPad Air, for example, which is a little cheaper. Or check out alternatives from cheaper brands like Samsung, Xiaomi, etc. Just make sure to watch lots of reviews and inform yourself about all the pros and cons before purchasing anything. So, do we recommend getting an iPad to draw? Definitely. My wife loves its portability. Pen displays have never been her thing as there were a lot of wires involved all the time, and having to connect them to the laptop whenever she wanted to draw was a pain for her. She works so comfortably now as she can start drawing right away as soon as an idea pops up. And honestly, I too like being able to scribble down a cool concept I might get at 3 AM. Why does inspiration always hit us at the worst of times? I think the iPad is a super powerful device, made for both hobbyists and professional artists. But while I have drawn a few things on it, I personally still prefer my Cintiq for more refined pieces. Not because the iPad doesn't perform well, but I just feel more comfortable sitting at my desk with my computer. I guess it's something about the shortcuts feeling more at hand, to put it somehow. I feel like I can't work as fast or efficiently on the iPad because I rely a lot on shortcuts I've already memorized on the computer. Might just be my perception though. But even with that, I do totally recommend the iPad for digital art because it works great. And at least in my case, doodling on it feels super fun. Yeah, it's a huge investment, but if you really value portability over anything else, it's definitely a good purchase. A couple of cons to look out for though is that, in our opinion, the interface is not very intuitive, generally speaking. It might be because we've never had an Apple device before, but the way some options on the settings are arranged or the way some apps are built there feels very, I don't know, alien-like technology. Like, it's hard to find what we want because everything is grouped in places that make no sense for us. I guess if you already own an iPhone or a Mac, you might be familiar with it. But for us who don't, it's still kind of a struggle, and we keep discovering new things every day. And another downside I want to mention is that the iPad sometimes won't charge. It seems to be a sort of common issue from what I've read on the internet, and the only way to fix it is to turn it off and on again. It's an easy fix, at least. But you know, for something this expensive, you expect it to work close to flawless. And so these were our thoughts on the iPad Pro. We hope our opinion and experience can help you make a decision regarding the purchase of this sort of device. Remember to subscribe to my channel, click on the notification bell, and you should also visit my wife's Instagram and give her a follow, maybe. She's an amazing artist. I'll leave you all the links in the description box as usual. Lastly, let me plug in my Patreon once again and remind you all that you can find more content and early access to my videos and stuff there, as well as to support me so I don't starve. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye!